Amazing moment, girl's pain exposed, millionaire father discovers transformative way to heal her. Lucy stared at the envelope in her trembling hands, the familiar scrawl of her school's logo mocking her from the taunting paper. It felt as if the weight of the world lay on her shoulders, crushing. With each passing second, her heart raced, the numbers taunting her as if they were alive. Failing grades. She had tried to hide it, bury it beneath layers of smile and laughter, but here it was the indisputable proof of her inadequacy. Her father, Thomas, was a self-made millionaire, a man whose world revolved around corporate ambition and status. He believed that stacking dollars equated to success, that financial support was all she needed. Little did he know that the facade she wore was crumbling beneath the pain of dyslexia, a silent storm that had long roiled within her. In the evenings, when darkness draped over their suburban home, Lucy would often lose herself in thoughts that spiraled into despair as she watched her father flick through his emails, his face illuminated by the glow of a screen. Would he even notice if she vanished? Did he care beyond the empty achieve more mindset that defined their lives? A chasm was yawning between them, filled with unspoken fears and wasted breaths. Every day felt like a solitary battle, and all she craved was a connection, a flicker of understanding. But how could she communicate the profound depths of her anguish when words felt like treacherous cliffs she could never traverse? When a sudden urge for validation gripped her, she confronted Thomas. "You don't even see me," she screamed, a truth now demanded to be acknowledged. His eyes widened, not with comprehension, but bewilderment. The confrontation sent shockwaves through their house, unraveling years of emotional neglect. For every word she yelled, his silence spoke volumes. Suddenly, a thought struck, laced with desperation. What would it mean for him to understand her pain? And more horrifyingly, what if he never could? The realization paralyzed her. Thomas stood at the brink of a decision, caught between the allure of endless meetings and the desperate need to be a father. He vacillated between wanting to drown himself in ambition and the fear of losing Lucy forever. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days turned into a blur as Thomas decided to step back from his corporate life, to understand the world through Lucy's eyes. But with every workshop he attended about creativity and art, anxiety simmered beneath the surface. What if she was never good enough? What if all his efforts amounted to nothing? Each detail he probed grew heavier, the truth of his success tainted by the struggle of his daughter. As Lucy began to express herself through art, a flicker of hope ignited within her. But with success came a new fear. Would his dream of her thriving overshadow her own? The invitation to present at a local gallery felt like both a blessing and a curse, looming like a storm cloud. The anticipation was nerve-wracking. Would he pivot back to his old ways, driven by ambition, or would he finally uncover the warmth of being present? The unanswered questions circled like vultures, leaving an unsettling feeling hanging in the air. And as Lucy prepared her pieces, a gnawing uncertainty gripped Thomas. Time was running out to prove himself as more than just a provider. Lucy felt the weight of her emotions on her canvas as she mixed vibrant colors, each stroke a cathartic release. The gallery presentation loomed large, and doubts manifested in her mind like shadows stalking her every thought. Would anyone see her? Her art transformed her struggles into beauty, but would the world recognize the depth of what she faced? This was her moment, a chance to finally break free from the silence that had bound her for so long. The day of the exhibition arrived, and with it, a surge of anxiety tightened around her chest. Lucy stepped into the bustling gallery, the scent of fresh paint mingling with the nervous energy vibrating in the air. She grasped the edge of her table, anchoring herself as she surveyed the crowd. Artists and patrons conversed animatedly, their laughter ringing through the room as they marveled at creative displays. But all she could feel was the spectral gaze of judgment weighing heavily on her. Thomas, standing on the periphery, wore an expression that oscillated between pride and concern. His presence provided a flicker of reassurance, yet anxiety gnawed at him with visions of her potential being crushed beneath the influx of unfiltered opinions. The unspoken tension hung thickly, each glance exchanged told a story of years of miscommunication. "Lucy," he called, striding toward her. She turned, the knot in her stomach tightening as anticipation mingled with dread. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said about being seen." The sincerity in his eyes made her heart flutter, igniting a tiny spark of hope. "Dad," it's just her voice faltered. She wanted to explain how every masterpiece she created echoed with her struggles, but the words tangled like her thoughts. "I understand now, a bit," he began, his voice steady yet tentative. "It's not just about supporting you with money or connections. It's about understanding who you truly are. I want to learn." For the first time, she noticed the shift in his demeanor, not just a businessman but a father striving to connect with his daughter on raw, unfiltered terrain. But fear still lurked in the corners of her mind. What if this moment didn't last, and the man standing before her reverted to his old corporate self once the paint dried and life returned to normal? Caught in the crossfire of hope and fear, Lucy both cherished and resented his attempts at connection. Something inside her stirred, finding volatile strength in the uncertainty. "You could start by really looking at my art. Can you do that?" The challenge hung in the air, her resolve to not only let him into her world but to gain validation through her work became her oxygen. He nodded, steeling himself. They wandered together through the room, pausing at each piece representing a facet of Lucy's struggles and triumphs. As he studied her creations, pieces of himself unfurled, and for the first time, she saw him shed the layers of businessman, becoming simply her father. Yet, with every moment of reconnection, fear and uncertainty pulsed beneath the surface. The gallery's buzz faded into a distant hum as Lucy began to feel exposed not just by the vulnerability of sharing her pieces but by the prospect of having to face the realities of life beyond the exhibition. As the crowd began to gather around her pieces, Lucy braced herself for the reactions, the admiration she secretly longed for that could also expose her rawest insecurities. Would this be it? A moment that changes everything, or just a fleeting spark? She wondered as she prepared to engage with viewers, poised at the brink of vulnerability. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, and the decisions she faced became clearer. Would she dive deeper into the world her art had opened, or would she retreat back into their shared silence? Before she could respond, a voice broke through the crowd, shattering her thoughts. "What a shame this exhibition is just for show. A family project failing at the final stage." The comment felt like a dagger aimed directly at her heart. The time had come to face not just the viewer's opinions, but the specters of her past fears. Lucy had to choose: would she confront the negativity head-on, displaying the full spectrum of her truth, or would she let it dim her voice before it had even begun to shine? The comment ricocheted through Lucy's mind, knotting her stomach further. As murmurs of agreement fluttered through the crowd, she realized the stakes had just escalated. Anger rose within her like bile, burning away the protective layers she had draped around herself. The day, intended for celebration, had become a harsh reminder of how deeply she hid behind her artwork, how terrified she was of the world seeing her naked vulnerability. Lucy looked at Thomas. His expression flickered between confusion and concern as he tried to gauge the sudden tension in the air. Could he sense her heartache as she grappled with the paradox of longing for connection while fearing judgment? She felt the weight of her emotions settle heavily on her shoulders, each one a reminder of the battles she fought in silence. Her thoughts whirled, and with every bit of resolve she could muster, Lucy stepped closer to the crowd gathered around her art. She engaged a small group who stood closely scrutinizing her work. "What do you see here?" she asked, her voice quiet yet firm. The question hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down in front of the naysayer. They glanced at each other, stunned by her challenge. A young woman with cascading curls stepped forward, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "I see pain transformed into beauty. I feel the struggle within each brushstroke. Encouraged, Lucy leaned into that response. Exactly. The colors may be vibrant, but they're rooted in pain and resilience. I wanted to create something that spoke to both depth and the raw journey we each face. As responses started to swirl around her, Lucy noticed the shadow of doubt beginning to lift. Opposition transformed into curiosity, amplifying the heartbeat of the connection she had yearned for. Even in their skepticism, there was dialogue forming, a space for understanding. She understood then that her art reflected not just her battles but could also bridge human experiences. Wordlessly, Thomas stepped closer, listening intently, no longer an outsider but part of a conversation that grew richer with each passing moment. She caught a glimpse of the pride on his face, admiration mingling with his unease. In that fleeting moment, he appeared less like an anxious parent and more like a partner in her artistic journey. Then she heard the voice again, sharp and critical, echoing through the gallery. All talk a gimmick. This is nothing but a fancy story dressed in color. The sneer sliced through the hopeful atmosphere, and Lucy's resolve quivered. Yet, as she turned towards the voice, she felt from somewhere deep inside another gust of strength. This could become part of her narrative, a moment to confront. Would she allow their mockery to weaken her? Or would her truth reign, displaying her tenacity? Well, aren't we all just stories in motion? She retorted, casting a glance at the heckler, challenging vulnerability as they did. Every brushstroke is my truth laid bare. It might not be for everyone, but it certainly isn't a gimmick. It's my life. The gallery fell silent, the audience caught off guard by both her boldness and her honesty. In that intertwining of self-defense and connection, Lucy felt a shift within her. She began to regard not only the voices around her but also her relationship with herself. This was more than an exhibition, it was the emergence of the artist she intended to become, someone unafraid to defend her work and, by extension, her story. She had to continue forging this path, risking everything by bringing her authenticity to the forefront. The tide was slowly turning. The crowd stood in contemplation, some looking at her pieces with fresh eyes, while others still clung to their skepticism. But recognition pulsed through her as she embraced the electric energy flowing between her and the viewers. "Thank you for your honesty," she said finally, resolving to face each opinion with an open heart. "But this is still more than just art for me." The participation of the audience hung palpable, and Lucy inhaled deeply, feeling alive, almost liberated. But as she scanned the gallery, noticing the mix of admiration and critique swirling around her, she found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotion. Knowing who she was and what she could achieve was empowering, yet the questions lingered: how much further could she push her narrative? What would happen when the crowd's fascination ebbed away? As she glanced back to Thomas, she realized that she wasn't finished yet. With one last glance at the crowd, the air heavy with expectation, she thought, what more could be unearthed from this point onward? And as the tension swelled around her, she prepared to confront the darker corners of her past and how they might inform her future. Would she uncover deeper truths, even at the risk of more cutting judgments? Lucy could feel the heartbeat of an undiscovered journey beginning. The moment hung in the air, charged with anticipation and uncertainty. Lucy could feel every pair of eyes weighing her, assessing the continuation of her story. She took a breath, grounding herself in the chaos as she prepared to communicate the truth of her experiences even further. In that moment, something snapped into focus. This wasn't merely an art exhibition, it was her personal renaissance. "Every artist has a story," she began, voice steady yet infused with a passion that rippled through her. "Yet the true challenge lies in revealing what we hide behind closed doors." She scanned the crowd, noting the shift a genuine interest sparked in the faces now keenly observing her. The backs of naysayers stiffened, and some nods of understanding rippled through. "My scars are not just mine, they are symbols of shared humanity. And while they can feel heavy, they also hold the power to unite us in moments of vulnerability." Her words carved a pathway through the tension, and she felt her confidence building with each breath. A collective disbelief mingled with fascination stirred the air. Lucy dared to delve deeper into her truth, recounting the journey that led her to create the very pieces they had come to critique. When I was at my lowest, art became my refuge. Each canvas allowed me to unravel my pain, to scream in color where words often failed me. Observing them grapple with the gravity of her narrative, Lucy acknowledged how her past, once a source of shame, could fuel her growth. The memory of her darkest days fueled an innate resolve, whispering that to transform her experiences into a form of inspiration was, in itself, an act of defiance. Then she felt it a surge of compassion. I understand that it's easy to dismiss my work as trivial or frivolous, especially if you haven't experienced the depths it reflects. But what I've learned is that our pain can cultivate empathy. My art is filled with the echoes of moments that question our humanity. It asks us, no, it demands us to feel. She searched for Thomas, her silent ally in this storm of discovery. There he stood, his eyes shimmering with a mixture of pride and encouragement, urging her forward. Energized, Lucy shifted her gaze back to the crowd. I'm learning to embrace the contradictions within me, the desire for connection clashing with the terror of exposure. A hand shot up, breaking the tension. But isn't it terrifying to put yourself out there? To risk everything? Absolutely, Lucy responded, a genuine smile breaking through the weight of her earlier apprehensions. But within that fear lies the potential for growth. We cannot expect our voices, or our art, to resonate deeply if we are unwilling to step into the light, raw and exposed. As she shared, something shifted in her, the realization that speaking her truth wasn't merely about defense, it was about liberation. The audience, compelled by her authenticity, began reflecting their thoughts. People who once stood skeptical were now connecting, the conversation evolving into something more profound. Minutes turned into an intoxicating flow of dialogue. Some members offered personal reflections, sharing their struggles and how Lucy's pieces resonated. Others admitted they had once rushed toward conclusions without understanding context. Each exchange became a thread weaving humanity into a tapestry that was simultaneously her own and theirs. However, as the discussions rolled on, Lucy couldn't ignore the unsettling itch of doubt lingering in her mind. What if once this moment was over, the world outside the gallery rushed back into judgment? Would she have the strength to confront her vulnerabilities again? And what of the critical voices that could still find her? Her heart raced with a new determination. This was her moment to carve a space in the art world on her own terms. If the stakes had escalated, so too had her capabilities. It was an opportunity to redefine what her art meant, not as an isolated refuge but as a rallying cry for anyone who had ever felt unseen. Lucy's gaze swept over the crowd. She had far more to express, more elements of her journey to explore. A fire ignited. There is so much more to unpack from these experiences, and I invite you all to explore it alongside me. Together, we can confront the shadows and uncover the layers that construct our identities. The crowd's energy shifted once more, a shared curiosity mingling with expectation. She had become not just a voice but a guide, leading them deeper into the emotional landscape she had meticulously crafted. Everything felt like it was on the brink of something monumental. Yet a looming question remained, whispering just beneath the surface: how would she confront the next layer of scrutiny, the one that threatened to strip away her hard-earned confidence? As Lucy prepared to take the next leap, the walls of the gallery felt less like barriers and more like invitations to step into the unknown, unfolding a narrative she was now more than ready to explore. Lucy took a moment to center herself before diving back into the swirling tapestry of collective emotions. Sparks of recognition flickered within the audience, igniting connections she never anticipated. Yet, there was a lingering sense of fragility tethered to her growing confidence. Confronting harsh realities was painful, it was a form of catharsis but came with risks. Would she be able to withstand the more profound scrutiny her art now demanded? With a calculated breath, she continued. In sharing my experiences, I've uncovered a redefinition of strength. It's not the bravado we often chase but an acceptance of our vulnerabilities. Each painting embodies moments of doubt, fear, and resilience. To expose these stories is to invite you to piece together your own narrative. She paused, scanning the sea of faces. What stories have you buried beneath layers of expectation and judgment? Lucy's willingness to question not only her own truths but also the crowd's perceptions opened an unexpected dialogue. Voices began to weave throughout the room, discussing the stigma surrounding vulnerability, the pressure to conform, and the hidden battles each person faced. As ideas intertwined, she observed Thomas's proud smile, a reflection of her persistence in the face of adversity. Yet, another haunting thought sliced through her moment of triumph. The conversation was invigorating, but how might it become distorted once the event concluded? Preparing herself for potential backlash was as daunting as the revealing itself. She wavered between exhilaration and dread, her mind skirting around the notion of confrontation. Was she now a target, and if so, would the rays of growth she had cultivated remain steadfast under scrutiny? Shaking off the cloud of doubt, she invoked the strength of her past to push forward. Art, for me, functions as a mirror reflecting our sheer humanity. It can expose our innermost fears while serving as a call to empathy. In doing so, we craft bridges where isolation once reigned. Her pulse quickened with each word. The potential for healing layered within this discourse was palpable, and she resolved to embrace this vulnerability, even in the face of criticism. As the discussion roared again, Lucy felt a spark of electricity run through her veins, a reminder of the power that comes from shared storytelling. In that moment, she glimpsed a part of herself she had yet to fully embrace, her role as a catalyst for change. Navigating the delicate balance of self-advocacy and the potential for judgment demanded something more from her. It became clear that she was stepping into a transformation of her own identity. Could she redefine her purpose as an artist and advocate, or would tentative voices whisper her into submission? Suddenly, an anonymous voice pierced through the chatter. What if your truth isn't enough for some people? It asked, a shadow stretching across her resolve. What if they never understand or accept your story? An uncomfortable wave of tension swept through the room. Dread coiled in her stomach as she considered the legitimacy of the question. Would her newfound confidence shatter against a wall of doubters? Had she built this moment on the shifting sands of public opinion? Lucy locked eyes with Thomas, who offered silent encouragement. This was not her first encounter with judgment, and the sting of vulnerability could amplify her resolve if she willed it. It's true, she replied, her voice steady yet unwavering. Acceptance can be hard-earned. But embracing our stories, even when misunderstood, is key to inviting dialogue, growth, and understanding. As the audience grappled with her response, she felt a spark within, a flicker of determination ignited by the confrontation. She could choose to retreat into safety, or she could face this daunting reality head-on, addressing the criticism that had once buried her creativity. Would she dare to boldly express even deeper layers of honesty in her art, risking further misunderstanding? Or would she succumb to the temptation of protection, letting silence shadow the most profound aspects of her journey? An impending decision loomed, one that could dictate her future as both an artist and an individual. As the discussions continued to swirl, Lucy remained acutely aware that her sense of empowerment depended on her willingness to face her fears head-on. If she was to invite others to join her inscrutable journey, she would first have to traverse the unwelcoming terrain of vulnerability, and soon, the next challenge would emerge to test her resolve. The atmosphere of energized discourse gradually faded as the event drew to a close, but Lucy's heart raced with pent-up anticipation. She felt the weight of the questions lingering in the air, pressing on her chest like a heavy fog. Could she truly stand firm against the storm that scrutiny might unleash? As she packed her things, her fingers trembled slightly, each brush a tool wielded for both expression and exposure now felt like both a weapon and a shield. How vulnerable had she made herself? Her art had always been a conduit for truth, but now it seemed to straddle new territory, a line between acceptance and rejection that was razor-thin. Thomas approached her, his eyes glinting with pride yet threaded with concern. You handled them well, he said, voice low. But how do you feel about what you shared? Do you think they'll understand? The question knocked the wind from her, forcing an internal reckoning. They had resonated, yes, but the looming specter of misunderstanding encased her thoughts. I hope so, but there are always those who want, she replied, her voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. What if they just see the surface? What if they miss the deeper layers? With each articulated worry, Lucy felt the familiar tug of self-doubt. It was a demon she had battled for years, but today, she sensed the potential for mastery over it. Instead of retreating, she could engage with this doubt, dissecting its roots and recognizing its attempts to subdue her. Then let that be their loss, not yours, Thomas countered firmly, capturing her gaze. You've authentically shared parts of yourself that many would shy away from. That kind of honesty has power. Remember, it highlights not just your journey, but reflects back on them, encouraging their own revelations. His words ignited something in her, a flicker of resolve that had been dimmed by fear. She imagined her next painting one that would delve even deeper into her soul. If her earlier works had skimmed the surface of her struggles, what might she uncover by going further? What raw narratives remained buried beneath layers of expectation? Lucy glanced around the room one last time, absorbing the energy that lingered. It was almost palpable. Each face harbored stories begging to be told, and perhaps the next canvas she approached might serve as a cathartic conduit not only for herself but for them too. To turn vulnerability into strength, perhaps that was the essence of her art. Maybe I need to challenge myself even more, she mused aloud, newfound determination creeping into her tone. To truly portray the dark corners of my psyche, the bitterness, the anger, the disillusionment. Maybe that's where the real transformation happens. Thomas nodded, inspiration reflected back at her. It could be your most powerful work yet. But it won't be easy. Open wounds can be painful to confront. The thought sent a shiver down her spine, both thrilling and terrifying. The notion of diving deeper would demand grappling with her past, the very sources of her vulnerabilities. Still, the flame of ambition flickered in her heart. What could emerge if she ventured into those raw territories? Would she emerge with a masterpiece or with scars laid bare? Would those scars become symbols of resilience or reminders of defeat? As the evening darkened and the room emptied, Lucy lingered, contemplating the promise of her next step. She considered her upcoming exhibition a space where she could unveil this next phase of her journey. Would she brave the raw, unedited versions of her narratives, shaking her foundation and risking everything? In that moment, a clarity emerged amidst the trepidation. The challenge she faced would not only test her as an artist but as a human being. With a final glance at the canvas she planned to brave next, she breathed in deep, steeling herself for the emotional excavation ahead. The upcoming weeks would demand unwavering concentration and introspection, a deep dive into discomfort. If she was to truly confront her demons, she would need to uncover what lay within the shadows of her experience. As she turned to leave, the image of her next painting formed vividly in her mind, a starting point for her journey into the dark. The time had come for her to face those hidden truths, to confront the layers of fear that had been stifling her. The real test loomed ever closer. Would she find strength in her vulnerability, or would darkness encase her once more? Lucy's studio was submerged in a penetrating silence, the kind that echoed the battle resting in her mind. It was the calm before the storm of creation, punctuated only by the hum of the overhead lights as she stood before her blank canvas. Here, surrounded by the remnants of her past work, the vibrant hues teasing at her, she wrestled with fear and exhilaration in equal measure. The thought of confronting her raw emotions unleashed an undercurrent of fear that gripped her stomach. What if her brush strokes could not capture the turmoil within? She knew the darkness was there, lurking beneath the surface, tendrils of anxiety reaching out, questioning the very essence of her purpose. Could she bear to expose herself so completely? Each canvas felt like a precipice, threatening to plunge her into the depths of her own vulnerability. Determined to channel her unease, Lucy took a deep breath. The first touch of paint was a desperate plea for expression, an act of defiance against the doubt shadowing her journey. She chose a deep, turbulent blue, the color swirling in her mind like the turbulent emotions she was about to bring to life. Each stroke became a conversation with herself, her inner voice growing louder with every pass of the brush. She painted feverishly, pouring the angst and bitterness that had long festered beneath the surface. Images began to emerge, a tempest of tangled emotions depicted through abstract forms. Deep red swirls showcased anger, while shadowy figures hauntingly loomed at the edges of her canvas, reminders of her past. A flicker of recognition surged within her. She was not merely cataloging her pain, she was reclaiming it. As the days melted into nights, Lucy found herself submerged in this creative ritual. Each session brought both clarity and chaos, and yet, she embraced the ebb and flow. The canvas became a battleground, a place where she could confront past disappointments, fears of inadequacy, and the shadows of insecurity. It was grueling work, diving into the depths of her pain, but with each layer, she unearthed the hidden complexities of her identity. In the quiet moments, as she stepped back to survey her progress, Lucy discovered an unexpected ally. Her anger served as fuel for resilience. An urge was ignited within her to extend beyond personal pain and connect with the universal experience of struggle. She began to envision her exhibition as more than a showcase of her art, but a narrative of healing and strength that could speak to others navigating their own tumultuous paths. However, gnawing self-doubt would not relinquish its grip so easily. As the exhibition date approached, a fear crawled back into her mind. What if they didn't see her truth? What if the world looked upon her struggles with misunderstanding, or worse, apathy? The gnarled threads of anxiety wove tighter around her throat at the thought of facing an audience, of standing exposed before those who might reject what her heart so earnestly wanted to convey. She found herself at a crossroads, torn between the desire for authenticity and the instinct to shield herself from potential rejection. Finally, confronting the swirling turmoil within, she made a decision. This exhibition would not simply display her art, it would narrate her story, the aspirations, fears, and triumphs intricately interwoven into her canvas. By leaning into her truth, she realized, she could spark conversations that transcended art. It could ignite reflection, prompting others to dive into their own hidden depths. The thought sent electricity through her veins. She was not just a creator, but a connector, a catalyst for transformation. As the final layers of paint settled on the canvas, she felt the heavy fog of uncertainty begin to lift. Perhaps, in opening herself up, she could illuminate the shadows of others, too. Yet, beneath the excitement, a twinge of anxiety bubbled up. Would she be able to summon the courage to unveil her soul? The countdown to the exhibition began in earnest, and Lucy resolved to embrace what came next. As she looked at her almost complete work, a peace settled over her. The merging of chaos and creativity had birthed something profound. But, as she stepped away from the canvas, she felt the looming weight of unreleased memories pushing against her heart. What truths still lay buried just out of reach? Would the unveiling reveal more than she had ever imagined, or would it unearth a reality she was not ready to confront? The answers etched in shadows awaited, and she realized with a jolt that this was merely the threshold. The journey into vulnerability was only beginning, and she was on the edge of something life-altering. Lucy had barely settled into the rhythm of her creative surge when the weight of anticipation pressed against her chest. The empty spaces of her studio felt suffocating, charged with the tension of her unexpressed turmoil. While her brush danced across the canvas, the daunting questions about the exhibition loomed larger than life, entwining with her thoughts. Each stroke became a battle, a visual representation of her struggle against the self-doubt that felt like a stubborn shadow. Determined to maintain her newfound momentum, she began to explore the complexities of her emotions more deeply. Each palette she mixed contained not just colors but fragments of her past regrets, disappointments, and the echoes of dreams that had slipped through her fingers. The vibrant strokes turned into a cathartic release, revealing layers of her soul. Yet, the darker hues snaked around the edges, tugging at her consciousness, reminding her that some feelings were too painful to confront. The reality of her exhibition set a pace that was both thrilling and terrifying. With each passing day, she felt the weight of expectation settle on her shoulders, expectations not just from her viewers, but from herself. This was not simply about showcasing her artistic talent, it was about bearing her vulnerability to the world in a way she had never done before. As she painted, thoughts spiraled in her mind: would her audience connect with her truth, or would they dismiss it as mere chaos on a canvas? In the midst of this chaos, Lucy found small moments of clarity. It wasn't just about the display, it was about dialogue. Conversations bubbled beneath the surface of her artistic impulses, waiting to be unleashed. This journey transformed her not only as an artist but as an individual. She began to envision her role as a storyteller, poised to delve into the human experience of fear and resilience. But as the date drew closer, an unexpected confrontation rose to the surface of her thoughts: the disapproval of her father. The memory of their last heated conversation echoed in her mind, a reminder of the chasm between their worlds. He had criticized her artistic pursuits, condemning them as impractical, a diversion from success. Transcending the emotional turmoil in her work now tied back to her desperation for his approval. Would the unveiling of her art be another chance at validation or a source of discord? Lucy mulled over the conflicting dynamics. Could she truly forge her path while still yearning for her father's acknowledgement? What if the very act of revealing her vulnerability invited judgment instead of support? It was a moral dilemma that sent tremors of doubt racing through her thoughts. Suddenly, an idea sparked within her: maybe it was time to confront him directly. She wanted to share her journey, not merely the art but the process that had birthed it. Perhaps illuminating her vulnerabilities would allow him to see beyond the canvas and the artist he had often failed to understand. Embracing that possibility felt daring. It demanded an uncharted vulnerability even beyond what she had poured into her paintings. As she paused, brush in hand, feeling the pulse of her heart against her ribs, Lucy realized that each layer of paint on her canvas was replicating her inner evolution. She could not only expose herself to the audience poised to judge her work, but also to the man who had shaped so much of her self-perception. The anticipation both terrified and exhilarated her. Perhaps the exhibition was not merely about her art but a chance to confront the very foundation of her fears. However, as she contemplated this revelation, the shadow of uncertainty flickered. Was she ready to amalgamate her art with familial reconciliation? Would vulnerability in the presence of her father create profound connection or deepen the divide? The exhibition day was drawing closer, and Lucy stood poised at the precipice of transformation, ready to leap into the unknown. As her heart raced with both fear and excitement, one question reverberated within her: could this be the moment that not only defined her as an artist but also as a daughter brave enough to challenge the expectations and confront the pain head-on? Yet, as she gazed at the incomplete work that reflected her turmoil, she sensed a deeper truth waiting beneath, a collision of art, emotion, and relationship that loomed just ahead. What awaited her on the other side of this unveiling? The day approached with a clarity that sharpened Lucy's instincts. The air in her studio seemed to pulsate, mirroring her racing thoughts. Each morning bled into one another, a cycle of preparation, reflection, and growing uncertainty. She found herself endlessly drawn to the mirror-like surface of her canvas, where every brushstroke resonated with her internal confrontations. Each hue revealed not just her emotional state but the weight of expectations, including her father's looming shadow. As she continued to paint, an idea crystallized: maintaining the narrative of her art was essential, but so too was stepping into the role of a true protagonist in her life. She envisioned sharing the intricate stories behind her creations. What had once felt intimidating now began to ignite a flame of courage within her. Perhaps this artistic journey she was undertaking wasn't solely about expression, it was also about connecting first with herself, then with others, including her father. And there it was, the pivotal question: how would he respond? Each day, Lucy initiated subtle changes in her routine, integrating purposeful practices that aligned with her newfound resolve. Morning journaling gave voice to her fears, translating chaotic emotions into written form. With every entry, she discovered pieces of herself, an emerging artist armed with a story that deserved to be told. Nights were spent in contemplation, meditating on her father's words, dissecting the core of their disagreements and assessing her own conditional longing for his validation. The pendulum of confidence began to swing in her favor as she meticulously prepared for the exhibition. Visitors would need to feel the raw connectivity of what she had experienced. But the preparation was not devoid of tension. The vivid hues on her palette reflected her mindset, brighter for the hope and darker for the fear. Days turned into nights as she grew accustomed to the delicate dance of creative expression and personal reckoning. Yet, no amount of artistic preparation could silence the whirlwind of doubt that sometimes crashed into her thoughts. Was she risking too much? Was she abandoning the safety of superficiality for the complexity of truth? As she finalized her pieces, the uncertainty grew palpable, like a barely held secret on the brink of spilling. With a deep breath, she decided to reach out to her father, an invitation to come to her studio and see what she had crafted, both on canvas and within herself. That simple act felt massively monumental. Was she ready to expose the very vulnerabilities that had paralyzed her before? Would he meet her open-hearted attempt with understanding, or would her fears surface, bitter and unyielding? A cacophony of emotions spiraled within her as she awaited his response. The split between dread and anticipation widened her perspective. She was ready for unpredictability. Days later, her phone buzzed with a message from him, an acceptance that sent both chills and resolve through her. This upcoming meeting would not only unveil her art but also weave the narratives that had long been buried between them. As she stood before her almost complete canvas, the critical moment lay ahead. Vulnerability had shifted from mere concept to imminent reality. Lucy understood now that the act of creation was interwoven with her capacity to be forthright, both with herself and her father. With each day inching closer to their long-anticipated meeting, a daring question lingered in the depths of her mind: would this exploration of vulnerability be her artistic breakthrough, or would it crack the facade she had built around both her art and her relationship with him? The confrontation loomed, where art and emotion would collide loud and true, paving the way for a pivotal transformation. Would she emerge more radiant, accepted, or would their exchange plunge her further into emotional chaos? There was only one way to find out. The moment of truth was knocking. Her heart echoed in tandem now on to the next artful leap. The day of the exhibition dawned, radiating a bright optimism that stood in stark contrast to Lucy's swirling emotions. She carefully adjusted the final pieces of her installation, taking moments to breathe deeply as she struggled against the wall of anxiety pressing down upon her. Her canvases, vibrant and rich with narratives of pain and resilience, would soon be unveiled to a crowd of strangers and those who mattered most, including her father. Each brushstroke had been a cathartic release, and yet, as she stood in the gallery, she felt the weight of every emotion, all her fears and anxieties entwined with anticipation. Today was the culmination of her journey, the leap into vulnerability she had long both craved and feared. When the doors opened, patrons began trickling in, their laughter and chatter filling the expansive space. Lucy swallowed hard, her heart quickening as familiar faces appeared among the sea of spectators. Thomas had arrived, and with every glance exchanged, unspoken tensions and hopes lingered between them. As the crowd gathered around her pieces, Lucy felt a sudden wave of courage swell within her. She accepted the moment each viewer engaged in a dialogue that transcended mere observation. It was as if her art had become a vehicle for connection, inviting stories both shared and personal to emerge in the space between her and the audience. "I see struggle in this one," a young man remarked, standing before a particularly bold piece where deep blues mixed violently with fiery reds. "It feels alive with the pain yet so hopeful." "Yes," Lucy replied, her words tumbling forth, eager to connect. "Each stroke represented what I fought to express, a reflection of not only my struggles but also the universal battle we each face. Art can bridge those gaps." Thomas watched from a distance, pride converging with nervousness as he observed the light in Lucy's eyes, the transformation from a timid artist concealed by fear into a confident storyteller radiating authenticity. As the evening unfolded, Lucy spoke with each patron, engaging them in conversation, facing the criticism head-on as it arose. When a scoffer suggested her work fell short of depth, she felt her initial panic rise like bile. But she steadied herself, recounting how her trials with dyslexia forged resilience, shaping her into the artist standing before them. Art isn't always about perfection, she explained. It's about marking a journey, a record of who we are at various moments in time. My truth may not resonate with everyone, but it is valid. It is my journey. With every word delivered and every eye locked onto hers, Lucy sensed the fears that had bound her for years beginning to fracture. She was no longer the girl hiding behind a facade of inadequacy. Instead, she stood tall, embodying strength built through adversity. In that moment, Thomas stepped forward, and she sensed his fierce recognition of the bond he'd neglected for too long. "Lucy," he ventured, breaking through the hum of commentary. "I wanted to say your art has opened a pathway I didn't realize was there. I'm sorry for not seeing you before. I can see you now, and I'm proud of what you created." Tears pricked at Lucy's eyes, but she blinked them away as she noticed the authenticity in his gaze. Each word unfolded layers of their relationship, a tentative breadcrumb leading toward renewal. "I've been scared, Dad," she confessed, "scared that I wouldn't be understood, that our worlds were too far apart. But all of this is who I am. I'm not simply a means to your success, I am a storyteller. I am the art." His nod met her resolve, and suddenly the tension that once consumed her heart released. In that instant, clarity washed over her. This was more than just an exhibition, this was an opportunity to define her place as a daughter and artist within the narrative of their relationship. As the night wore on, applause reverberated, echoing around her creations, each heartfelt expression solidifying her belief in herself and heightening her confidence. The crowd, initially fraught with skepticism, seemed transformed by Lucy's authenticity. Through sharing her journey, she invited others to recognize their own struggles. The connections blossomed. By the end of the evening, Lucy stood at the foot of her exhibition, surveying the mosaic of reactions and reflections. Acceptance flooded her like warm sunlight, a recognition of not just her growing talent but the hard-won knowledge that her voice mattered, that authenticity could spark empathy and understanding. She had conquered a personal threshold, transforming her pain into a foundation for strength. As she exchanged goodbyes with her guests, Thomas enveloped her in a warm embrace. "You've done what I had wished to achieve at my highest peaks of success," he whispered. "You've created meaning. I won't dismiss any part of your journey again." In that embrace, Lucy understood a new ambition had ignited within her, a commitment to weave deeper narratives, push boundaries, and explore the vulnerabilities that shaped her creativity. She had stepped into her truth, and in doing so, unlocked her potential not only as an artist but as a daughter navigating the maze of human connection. With satisfaction coursing through her, Lucy knew she had accomplished something far greater than mere recognition. She had woven her tapestry of vulnerabilities, triumphs, and aspirations into a narrative that refused to be silenced again. As she looked toward the horizon of her future pursuits, she felt solid confidence within her, anchored by the acknowledgement of both herself and her father. Now, undeniably, this was her moment. A chapter closed, yet another daring adventure beckoned. The exploration of deeper truths awaited her brush, soundtracked by the echo of newfound possibilities. If you felt inspired by Lucy's journey, now is the time to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help others find these transformative tales. Comment your reactions and theories about this powerful conclusion. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this monumental resolution. You need to support this community of personal overcoming stories. Don't wait even one more second to share.